Between 1994 and 95, baseball didn't just slow down, it was nearly destroyed. The sport was hit with the longest work stoppage in MLB history.
There will be no more baseball in 1994.
Well, it is now official. No more regular season, no extended version of the playoffs, and for the first time since 1904, no World Series.
948 games gone. And for the first time in the history of North American professional sports, an entire postseason was canceled. No playoffs, no World Series, no closure. Both the 94 and 95 seasons were cut short before they could even reach 162 games. But you probably already knew that part. What you probably didn't know is that the disaster didn't start in 1994. It started 6 years earlier in 1988 with a $1 billion CBS television deal that quietly rewired the sports economy. And with MLB owners getting caught 3 separate times running secret collusion schemes to sabotage free agents. Put all of that together and you get a slow-building catastrophe, one that didn't just shut down baseball, it helped kill the Montreal Expos, derailed a golden era of talent, and exposed a new level of behind-the-scenes chaos and greed, to the point that the sitting president of the United States had to get involved to force players and owners to just agree with each other.
Unfortunately, the parties have not reached agreement. The American people are the real losers.
This is how baseball imploded long before the strike ever began, and why the fallout still haunts the game today. If you think you know the 1994 strike, the actual story is so much dumber, pettier, and more catastrophic than anyone remembers. It all started in 1988, the year And Justice and For All came out. MLB had signed a massive $1 billion TV deal with CBS. National broadcast deals by the early 90s had essentially collapsed, and this new broadcast deal with CBS came at one huge expense to MLB: regular season exposure. National broadcast of regular season games had dropped from over 30 per year to just 12 after 1990 with this deal. On top of that, in an effort to make up for the lost national exposure, teams like the Yankees sold their local TV rights for up to 150 games a year. Small market owners claimed that unless all teams shared local broadcasting revenues in addition to a salary cap being implemented, that it would lead to the downfall of those small market teams. However, these unstable local deals paid teams relatively little compared to what they were making on the prior national broadcast deals. Some teams earned as little as a few $1 million per year. MLB was not only losing money on these deals, but MLB popularity was sinking quickly due to lack of exposure to the public. Owners were left feeling that they were making less money, while player salaries at the time were skyrocketing. In 1980, Nolan Ryan was the highest paid player in baseball, making $1 million. And by 1994, Bobby Bonilla was baseball's highest paid player, making $6.3 million. To make matters even worse, both MLB players and owners could not have been further apart as far as trusting each other was concerned. Especially because in the 1980s, MLB owners on 3 different occasions teamed up with each other in an effort to not pay free agents so they can save millions of dollars. That's right, in an effort to stop the meteoric rise of players' salaries, some owners got together and quietly agreed they would not sign free agents from other teams, in addition to capping contracts at 3 years and basically pretend that the free agent market didn't exist, so that players would have to go back to their original team and have no choice but to accept whatever that team offered. And all 3 times the league was caught, and each time the ruling was the same, that it was collusion and to pay the players, so owners had to cut giant checks 3 different times for the same scheme. Due to this, overall, the Players Union Executive Director Donald Fehr did not trust baseball ownership. White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf was one of the owners caught in this collusion, as well as the Brewers owner Bud Selig, who would later become commissioner of baseball just a few short years later. Fay Vincent, who was the commissioner of baseball from 1989 to 1992, said the union basically doesn't trust the ownership because the collusion was a $280 million theft by Selig and Reinsdorf of that money from players, and that he thinks that it's polluted labor relations in baseball ever since it happened, and he believes it's the reason that Fear has no trust in Selig.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Vincent then resigned in 1992 after the owners voted on an 18-9 no-confidence vote against him. Mainly, they were angry at him over what they believed to be player salaries being out of control and falling TV ratings. Bud Selig, who was a very vocal opponent of Vincent, became the leader of a group of owners looking to remove him as commissioner. And after Vincent's resignation, Selig, who was the chairman of the executive council of MLB, automatically became the de facto acting commissioner of baseball. His installment as commissioner made the already rocky relationship between the players union and MLB even worse, given that Selig was a main player in the free agent collusion scandal of the 80s that pissed off the union in the first place. Now that the stage has been set, and with the collective bargaining agreement expiring on December 31st, 1993 with no new agreement in place, MLB entered 1994 as if it was a minefield, since this very season started while being played under the expired agreement. All the while, MLB and the Players Association labor negotiations continued as the season progressed. With tensions between both sides rising and baseball's overall financial health getting worse and players' salaries averaging an all-time high of $1.2 million, owners were looking for any way to save money where they could. By June 14th, owners delivered a formal proposal to the players' union that included revenue sharing, eliminating salary arbitration, free agency would start after 4 years instead of 6, and owners would retain a right to keep a 4 or 5 year player if they match his best offer. Oh, and of course, a salary cap, which surely will go over well. Anyway, owners claimed that this would all benefit the players, as their proposal would raise average salaries from $1.2 million to $2.6 million by the year 2001. To add even more insult, the owners also chose to withhold $7.8 million that they were required to pay per the previous expired agreement into the players' pension and benefits program.
What?
And then, on June 23rd, a Senate Judiciary Committee failed to approve an antitrust legislation by a vote of 10-7. Because of this, Fear said that it gave players and the union no choice and that they felt they were pushed into striking. On July 13th, the union said if serious negotiations between both sides did not begin soon, the players could strike in September, which would threaten the postseason. And by July 18th, the union formally rejected the offer the owners made back on June 14th. Just 15 days later, on July 28th, the Players Association Executive Board set an official strike date of August 12th, 1994. And with no agreement in place, the final games of that season were played on August 11th. The strike was official, and MLB had a full-blown work stoppage by August 12th. Both sides would meet again on August 31st, but after 3.5 hours of negotiation supervised by federal mediators, there was absolutely no progress made. On top of that, there were no further talks scheduled between both the owners and the players' union. Bud Selig would then announce on September 9th that there would be a deadline for a deal to be reached, and if not, the rest of the season would be canceled. Just 1 day before that deadline, though, on September 8th, the players' union offered a counter-proposal. They offered a 2% tax on the 16 teams with the highest payrolls, and that tax would be divided and paid to the bottom 12 payrolls. And on top of that, all teams would share 25% of all gate receipts.
Hey!
That's pretty good.
The owners then rejected this counteroffer, stating that these measures would not meet the cost, and on September 14th, 1994, Bud Selig officially canceled the rest of the regular season, the postseason, and the World Series. He cited that this strike had torn an irreparable hole in the game's fabric. This, unsurprisingly, had massive financial impacts to MLB. $580 million were lost in ownership revenue, and players lost an estimated $230 million in salaries. And that was only the beginning. Understandably, fans were pissed. Throughout the 1994 season, many showed up with signs to keep baseball going and to not cancel the rest of the season. After the cancellation, many swore to never watch an inning of Major League Baseball again, blaming both the owners' and players' greed. This also could not come at a worse time for some franchises and players. The Montreal Expos at the time of the strike had the best record in baseball and their best season in their history at 74-40. Many considered the Expos to be the World Series favorites, but the cancellation of this season led to their ownership gutting their roster due to payroll concerns. The Expos were never the same again, and by 2004, they would become the Washington Nationals and leave Montreal. Many experts consider the 94 strike to be the most significant factor that changed the franchise's trajectory negatively forever. Tony Gwynn at the time of the strike was batting .394 and had a real shot at becoming the first to finish a season batting over .400 since Ted Williams. Jeff Bagwell won the luckiest MVP in baseball history that year, given that he broke his hand on a hit by pitch on August 10th, the day before the strike became official. Considering this, he at this point would have missed the rest of the season, but instead won MVP unanimously. The guy who came in second was Matt Williams, who was also chasing history. At the time of the strike, he already hit 43 home runs on the year and was on pace to tie Roger Maris's single-season home run record of 61. The Yankees had the second best record in baseball, sitting at 70-43, and were a lock to make the playoffs for the first time since 1981. This is sort of important because their captain, Don Mattingly, had never been to the playoffs with the Yanks. His postseason debut would never come as he retired after the 95 season, and a rare long postseason drought for the Yanks would continue, but not for long. The strike also led to one of the strangest official trades in Major League history, where Dave Winfield was traded from the Twins to the Indians for a player to be named later, but since no further transactions could be made due to the cancellation of the season, the Twins officially would have to be listed as selling Winfield to the Indians. However, instead of his contract being purchased outright by the Indians, both the Indians and Twins team managements went out to dinner where the Indians paid for the tab, which means Dave Winfield was traded by the Twins to the Indians in exchange for dinner. With no progress being made at all, on December 6, Richard Ravitch, who acted as the negotiator on behalf of the owners, resigned. A federal mediator then took over and talks once again broke down on December 14th. The very next day, the owners got together and approved a salary cap plan for the league on a 25-3 vote. However, they delayed implementing this plan until they could speak to the players about it first. Well, unsurprisingly, that conversation did not go well, and with negotiations at a complete stop again, on December 23rd, the owners independently implemented a salary cap on the league. Surely this will go over well. By January 5th, 1995, 5 bills were introduced to Congress with the goal of ending the strike. This included several antitrust reforms. Lawmakers argued that the owners were abusing their antitrust exemptions during the labor disputes, as owners were threatening to use replacement players and were already making unilateral changes. Ultimately, the federal government stepped in as a way to pressure owners into ending the strike, as it was clear the owners were continuing to operate outside of normal competitive labor practices. Losing this special antitrust legal legal status that was granted by the Supreme Court way back in 1922 would be a huge blow to MLB and the owners. The union responded to this the very next day by declaring that all 895 MLB players were free agents due to owners implementing a salary cap without the union's approval. To make matters even worse, an arbitrator on January 10th awarded 11 players about $10 million as a result of collusion charges against owners. With both sides becoming pettier and seemingly growing further apart, on January 26, the President of the United States and saxophone player Bill Clinton ordered both the union and the owners to come to a decision by February 6th. To absolutely nobody's surprise, that deadline meant nothing because both sides still came to no resolution by that time. But on February 1st, the owners agreed to walk back the salary cap and go back to the old expired agreement's terms. Anyway, let's get back to the replacement players. Because talks were completely stalled, Bud Selig announced the league would use replacement players instead, stating that they were committed to playing the 1995 season and will do so with the best players willing to play. Owners offered $5,000 for players who went to spring training and another $5,000 for making an opening day roster. So who were the replacement players? These were basically non-union players that MLB owners attempted to use to fill out major league rosters, replacing the union players who were on strike. They varied in experience, from independent league players, minor leaguers who weren't on 40-man rosters, former players, and guys who were invited from semi-pro or international leagues. Many accepted as they were older or fringe players, and this was their only shot at the big leagues. Owners and MLB figured that fans would still show up, and maybe the threat alone could force players to agree to a salary cap. This backfired spectacularly. Fans immediately rejected the concept and hated this stunt, and not only that, the media and some owners hated it as well. Spring training in 1995 was entirely conducted with replacement players. Some teams issued temporary uniforms with no names at all.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
And if you think things couldn't get worse, at the same time the players' strike was going on, MLB was in a completely separate labor dispute with the umpires union, as umpires were pushing for higher pay, better travel schedules, better job security, and better working conditions. The negotiations between the umpires and the league also got to a point where replacement umpires were used in spring training alongside the replacement players. They used college umpires, high school umpires, amateur officials, minor league umpires, and retired umpires. However, the skill gap was enormous as the replacement umpires struggled with pitch calling, the MLB pace of games, blew routine calls, and had trouble managing players and coaches. Additionally, the Blue Jays could not play with replacement players or umpires due to labor codes in Ontario that prohibited the use of replacement workers. On top of that, the Orioles owner, Peter Angelos, who also happened to be a labor lawyer, announced that they would not be using replacement players. And by March 20th, the Orioles canceled the rest of their spring training games. And then on March 26th, MLB announced that they would be cutting the 95 season short because of the use of replacement players, dropping games from 162 to 144. Things then got way worse because on March 28th, the governor of Maryland signed a law stopping other teams from using replacement players at Camden Yards. Things got so bad that Congress and courts began intervening. This was where Judge Sonia Sotomayor issued an injunction in March of '95 that completely blocked owners from using replacement players. Some of these players did make the big leagues later, like Kevin Millar, Brendan Donnelly, and Corey Lytle. But for the most part, what happened to the replacement players afterwards? Well, the union banned them permanently from joining the union, which meant they were excluded from union benefits and given separate licensing agreements. Most of them never played in MLB, and the majority were cut shortly after. However, they were allowed to play on postseason teams. One issue, though, was that their names or likenesses could not be used on any commemorative merchandise whatsoever. They couldn't be used in video games either. This affected players like Kevin Millar, Shane Spencer, Damian Miller, the list goes on and on. The late 1980s national TV deal with CBS was designed to give each MLB team a major financial boost. Just about $10 million per year from CBS, plus another $4 million per team from a separate cable agreement. Teams could also negotiate their own local TV contracts, which for big market teams was enormous. The Yankees deal with MSG, for example, paid $41 million annually for 12 years. Radio rights added even more revenue. With all this new broadcast money flooding into the league, many teams ramped up spending on free agent contracts. But that huge CBS deal quickly turned sour. Ratings were far lower than expected, production costs were high, and CBS ultimately lost around $500 million on the contract. The network repeatedly asked MLB for a financial rebate, but MLB refused, leaving CBS to absorb the loss. Going back to that billion-dollar CBS deal, by the end of the 1993 season, CBS lost the rights to continue broadcasting baseball games on TV, and MLB officially took over the production of nationally televised games. MLB then sold those games rights to ABC and NBC, who created a joint venture called
the Baseball Network.
This, however, ended up being a disaster. Initially, both networks would alternate yearly on who would broadcast the World Series, the DS and CS games, a bunch of regular season games, primetime games, and the All-Star game. This agreement was supposed to last for 6 seasons, emphasis on supposed to. But because of the strike and loss of coverage, MLB, NBC, and ABC lost a combined $595 million in ad revenue, which led to NBC and ABC opting out of their deal after the 1995 strike-shortened season.
Yeah, boy.
The Players Union on March 29th voted to return to work if a U.S. District Court judge supported the unfair labor practices by the owners. The replacement player war was not over yet, however. The owners voted 26-2 in support of the use of these players, and Judge Sotomayor issued a preliminary injunction against the owners on March 31st. Part of this injunction was that the players and owners must honor the terms of the expired CBA until a new one can be reached, and the start of the regular season would be postponed 3 weeks. And then finally, after 232 days, the strike would officially come to an end on April 2nd, just 1 day before the regular season was supposed to start with the replacement players. This, however, was not the end of MLB's problems. They may have smoothed over their relationship with the players and the union, but they had a lot of work to do to get back into the good graces of fans. That's because after MLB's return, attendance in games were in an even worse steep decline, as well as television ratings, the thing that led us here in the first place. There was a 20% decline in attendance between 1994 and 1995. The fans that did show up voiced their displeasure by disrupting opening day games by throwing garbage on the field and booing throughout games. One guy paid for a plane to fly over Cincinnati during a game with a banner that said, "Owners and players, to hell with all of you." 3 guys at Shea Stadium had t-shirts that said "Greed" on them, and they threw $160 in dollar bills at players' feet to a standing ovation, and were booed as security got to them to stop them from continuing. The Players Union president was booed at the Yankees home opener, as the Yankees had their smallest opening day attendance in 5 years. The umpire labor dispute during this time was still not resolved either. Opening day games were still played with replacement umpires, and it was bad. Fans and players widely criticized their performance, as they were a mix of minor league, college, and high school umpires. But after a settlement was reached, the regular MLB level umpires returned on May 8th. It would take a while for MLB to recover attendance-wise. In 1993, MLB had a total attendance of 70.2 million. 1994 and 95 saw 50 million in total, while 96 and 97 saw just about 60 million in total. At this time, MLB was surely wishing for a saving grace. The problem is they maybe used a monkey's paw, as they wouldn't get back to the 70 million total category until 1998, when something very very interesting started happening that saved MLB, but that's a story for another video. In the end, billions of dollars were lost, fan trust was eroded, records that looked like they were about to be broken weren't, and players' careers were halted. In addition to a franchise being completely destroyed and relocated. Bud Selig went from Brewers owner meddling in free agent collusion to acting commissioner to full-time commissioner after the '98 season, and is now in the Hall of Fame for some reason. With the way the impending lockout of 2027 is being talked about and salary caps once again being at the forefront of conversation, history may just well repeat itself 30 years later. And hey, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribe. It really helps me and the channel out a ton with making these videos, and I do really appreciate that. What are your thoughts on the chaos that was the '94 MLB strike? You think it's going to be even worse in 27? Sound off in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video. Later.